Well, Muslim leaders have lifted a boycott of a key holy site in East Jerusalem after Israel removed the last of several new security measures. They urged Palestinians to re-enter the Al-Aqsa mosque compound for the first time since the crisis erupted nearly 2 weeks ago. Palestinians celebrated outside the old city after the last remnants of the security apparatus was taken away. The rising tensions over the measures sparked some of the worst street violence in years. We're joined now by our Middle East correspondent, Sophie McNeill. Sophie, why do you think Israel has relented over these security measures?
Good evening, Beverly. Well, today is Thursday, and what they were very worried about was a repeat tomorrow of what had happened last Friday in Jerusalem. As you mentioned, it was the worst street violence between Israelis and Palestinians in more than 2 years. It saw 3 young Palestinian men shot dead by Israeli forces, and then you had a family, an Israeli family, who was stabbed to death in their home, in their settlement near Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So there was great fear among the Israeli defence establishment and also among Palestinians of what was going to happen tomorrow if nothing had changed at Al-Aqsa, where this standoff had been taking place. So there was a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Internationally, he'd been heavily criticised by the Jordanian government, which is actually at peace with Israel, and is that relationship between Israel and Jordan is very important for Israel's security. And they had an incident this week. Things had gotten even worse after a security guard at the Israeli embassy in Jordan had actually shot dead 2 Jordanians after one of the Jordanians reportedly tried to stab this Israeli security officer. The whole Israeli embassy in Amman had to be evacuated. There was a standoff at the airport for a while before the Jordanians were going to let these Israelis leave. So what began as an argument over metal detectors at this holy site, it very quickly turned into it began to refer to all the issues that they fight about in Jerusalem. You know, it was about who controls the holiest site in Jerusalem for Muslims, Al-Aqsa mosque, that the Israelis do have security control of that site. It was about the relationship between Israel and its neighbours. So it very quickly encapsulated the issues that really just go to the heart of this conflict, Beverly.
Yes, they run so deep. Do you think this is going to calm things down now, Sophie?
What's going to happen in the next few hours is whether people will go inside Al-Aqsa mosque to pray, because part of this standoff is that Muslims did not want to enter after the Israeli government imposed these new security measures. They were imposed when 2 Israeli policemen were killed on the 14th of July. The Israelis said they didn't want any further attacks on their security forces. They didn't want people to be able to hide weapons in this Al-Aqsa mosque compound, so that's why they needed these new metal detectors. But for the Palestinians and much of the Muslim world, they saw this as a fundamental change in the status quo. That's what how they refer to it, and they thought that Israel was using this attack to try to impose further security control of their holiest site in Jerusalem, and that's why this turned into such a flashpoint crisis. The fact now that Israel has backtracked, has removed every new installation that had been put in since that attack, is being seen as a huge victory by the Palestinians. That's how the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas described it today. The Mufti of Jerusalem gave instructions to Palestinians this morning saying, you know, we have won. These measures have been taken down. We can now go back and pray inside Al-Aqsa, because people had been refusing to enter and praying in the streets. We're just waiting, Beverly, because that prayer is going to take place in the next few hours, and we're going to see if basically the thousands of Palestinians that have been praying in the streets are going to walk into the mosque for the first time in a week.
And of course, as you pointed out earlier, Sophie, the tensions there are so deep. Will this have a lasting impact, this crisis?
It's interesting. We're waiting to see what happens with Jordan, because, as I mentioned, it is such an important relationship for Israel. And the Jordanians wanted this Israeli security guard who had shot dead these 2 Jordanians. They wanted him to come back and go on trial. Of course, he has diplomatic impunity, so Israel was very happy when he actually was allowed to fly out of Jordan and back to Israel. But what happened is that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu really welcomed this security security guard back, and he was on television speaking to the security guard and called him saying, "We're so happy for you to be back." And the Jordanians saw this as very insulting and thought that the Israeli government had gone out of their way to give him a hero's welcome back home after 2 Jordanians had just been shot dead by the security guard. So now the Israeli embassy in Jordan is unstaffed. There's been rumours in the Jordanian press of the Jordanian government saying that Israeli staff members won't be allowed back into that embassy until there is some agreement over what happens in relation to these killings. I can't imagine that Israel is going to be sending this staff member back. He does have diplomatic impunity, but the Jordanian street is going to be very angry if they see that there's no justice served over this incident that they feel very angered by. So this could potentially be a standoff. What's it going to take for this Israeli embassy to reopen in Amman? The other thing that was very interesting is seeing the very harsh response by the Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan to the Israelis over this incident. He's been very critical of the way Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has handled this crisis, and they were actually having a diplomatic war yesterday on Twitter. The Turks really insulted the Israeli government about how they'd handled the Al-Aqsa issue, and then the Israeli Foreign Ministry tweeted back to the Turkish Foreign Ministry and said, "Well, look, you look at how you treat the Kurds. You're occupying northern Cyprus." So over the past year, Israel has been working really hard on their relationship with Turkey, and there's been quite a few steps forward. It's going to be interesting to see if this incident is going to have a long-lasting effect on those moves for those two governments to have a better relationship.
Appreciate your time tonight, Sophie. Thank you.
Thanks, Beverly.